the show. Thanks for tuning in on this Tuesday, April the 14th. Hope you're staying safe. Hope you're hanging in there. Hope those that you love are doing well. We're all trying to get through this together. I appreciate you tuning in. It is Daniel Wortman coming to you live from the Dream Sports Studios. It is 9 a.m. on the East Coast. This is your 6 a.m. early morning wake-up call out west and all time zones in between and around the world. Welcome into the show. Coming up here in just a second, we're going to have Kartik Krishner joining us, a friend of the show, to go through some topics. One of the big things that I want to get to him with today is this idea of making lemonade out of lemons. This idea of moving our professional calendars to get them properly aligned for all sorts of reasons with a fall to spring calendar. There are so many reasons to do it, and I can't find a single reason not to do it. And so we're going to get into that here in just a minute. But before we do, I just want to say welcome into the show. Thanks for tuning in. As always, we appreciate it. And our sponsor this half hour is Duktig Brand, DUKTIG brand.com. Go there today. Use promo code DW Show. You'll get 10% off of your order at DuktigBrand.com, DUKTIG brand.com. Use promo code DW Show. You get 10% off of your order. And you're going, what are you ordering? What am I getting? Well, you're going to get a really cool notebook, a journal, apparel. There's all kinds of stuff there for you to check out. If you're into the game, if you coach, this is the site for you. You need to go there and check them out at DuktigBrand.com. We'll be right back with Kartik Krishner right after this. Welcome back into the show this morning. I really appreciate you tuning in each and every weekday morning at 9 a.m. Eastern. And this morning we are joined by Kartik Krishner, a friend of the show. Kartik, welcome. How are you today?
I'm doing well, Daniel, as well as anyone can do in this COVID-19 time. I hope you and your family are doing well as well.
We are, man. We're hanging in there and, trying to obviously listen to local and national officials about, how to do day-to-day life. And we're trying to keep up with that as best as possible. So far, so good. So we're okay. A lot of family time, a lot of family walks and family bike rides, and then the rest of the time just here at the house, staying away from everybody. We're pretty much isolated, I guess, is the best way to say it, which is weird. It's a weird world we're living in at the moment. So, but we're good. Your family good?
Yes, we are. I appreciate it. we're hanging in there. I mean, I know a few people, not family, but a few friends who've contracted the virus. No fatalities, thankfully. You know, it's running its course with people, but our family's been unaffected.
Yeah, same here. I've got a few friends that have family members that have been affected, and so you know, it's definitely something that you know is we can't just. I wish it was over, right? I mean, like I wish the whole thing, but at the same time, I understand what these families are going through and what the world's going through, and we're just all having to be patient. So, you know, hopefully we'll get through this sooner rather than later, and we'll be okay. But it's definitely something that is serious, and I hope people are definitely listening and taking you know, heed of the warnings, so that we can you know, find a cure, find a path forward, and hopefully get on to getting back to life as normal as quick as possible. Even though right now we don't know what that might look like, when that might be, etc. So, and those realities really are facing, you know, all of sports, not just soccer, but all of sports around the world. Everything about life is at a standstill at the moment, as you know, as the audience knows. One of the things that's being affected right now, and the conversations are intense about, is the American soccer schedule when we're talking about professional soccer. We already, in my view, do it wrong by playing spring to fall, and so the USL Championship, they had their opening weekend, and then everything got shut down. Major League Soccer, I think, had 2 weekends maybe, and then everything got shut down, and so you know, all of these professional teams, these leagues, have been, you know, sitting here trying to, number one, figure out when they can get back together and get going, and number two, you know, trying to figure out alternatives. What can we do based on when we can get back? And so, you know, from what I'm hearing, and I'm curious to what you're hearing and seeing, from what I'm hearing is they're kind of looking at different scenarios based on different restart dates or restart windows, right? So if they could get together and get going again, let's say in May or June, then they're looking at one reality. If it pushes later and later towards August or September, that's a whole different reality. What are you hearing before we kind of get into, you know, some of the what I think is a really big opportunity in terms of what some might consider a radical change in the fall to spring calendar. What are you hearing in terms of these windows and plans based on, you know, say a May, June versus a July, August?
Yeah, I think we're realistically looking at July, August now, which is, and I have to give, and I'm not always the most praiseworthy person towards MLS or USL, but I have to give both those leagues credit in how they're handling this in terms of scheduling and putting fan and player safety ahead of maybe where some of the leagues in Europe did. I mean, I think it was now looking back that they played this second leg between of the Champions League between Valencia and Atalanta, a club from Italy, which was already a hot spot, traveling to Spain, which was becoming a hot spot at the time. Yes, they played in front of closed doors, but there were staff, there were players, there were coaches, and a number of Valencia players tested positive within days of the game for coronavirus. So I think we've been more responsible with soccer leagues in this country than they were in Europe. And obviously the Premier League and Bundesliga, as we speak, are contemplating an earlier restart. I'm hearing it'll be more likely July, August. Now, if that's the case, we can already begin to think about scenarios for how you actually complete this season. And for USL clubs, now MLS, I think, can probably get away with having a shortened season. They probably shouldn't, but they can get away with one. I think for USL clubs, Dan, it's really imperative they get a full slate of home matches in. Those clubs are almost entirely dependent on match day revenue, whether it's ticket sales or concessions or parking in the places they control concessions and parking, merchandise sales at games, etc. I think it'll be very difficult for that league, for a lot of their teams, to keep the lights on, honestly, if they don't complete a full season, which I think then means we have to start talking about calendar scenarios in which maybe they flip their calendar. I think certainly MLS could as well. I just wonder if MLS feels like they can have an abbreviated season and just kind of reboot and reconfigure on their normal calendar, or what they consider their normal calendar next year. Now, you and I have talked for years, and some others like the great Eric Winalda have talked for years about the need for us to flip our calendar. And this is an opportunity to do that. I want to, before we get too deep into that, just remind people that in the areas of the country where you and I live, it is oppressively hot during the summer. And so while your teams play through the summer in these whether it's in summer adult amateur leagues or whether it's in professional leagues like MLS and USL and now NISA, you're not training at the same level you would if you were playing on the European calendar. So there is a player development angle of this too that I want to cover. It's not just all about business and even aligning the transfer windows. There is actually, I think, a detrimental player development situation where, also, quite frankly, having worked for a number of clubs in the lower divisions and having worked for a league, training is oftentimes just scrubbed because of heat or because of thunderstorms in the southeast. And you can speak to folks who've worked for the Charleston Battery that they've gone whole weeks without training because of the weather, and then had to turn up and play a match. They're not the only club. From Tampa Bay, Fort Lauderdale, Carolina Railhawks, a number of clubs in the southeast this has happened to through the years. So I was just mentioning Charleston because I've had the conversation with a former player there about that. So I think this is an opportunity potentially.
Yeah. So picking up, before we get into the schedule and the practicalities of the schedule and some of the motivating factors going into this idea of fall to spring, there are so many reasons why to do this, and I want to get there and I want to go through it. But one thing you mentioned that before we do is the realities of the American soccer system, because Major League Soccer has intentionally undercapitalized the market. They have intentionally suppressed investment in the game by the way that they have gone about operating their business for 25 years. Having first division status and the ability to have this kind of quasi relationship with the federation, and part of their business model being suppressing player wages, suppressing budgets, etc., to control costs. I'm not getting into that argument of whether that's a good idea, bad idea, whatever. I'm just saying that's a reality, okay, for the audience. That has happened. It continues to happen. It is one of the core pieces of the Major League Soccer business model. Until that reality changes, one of the byproducts, the side effects of that on the entire ecosystem, is that the primary source of revenue for most clubs, not just professional, including amateur, is game day revenue. That's gate, that's tickets, that is, sponsors that are dealing with game day events or game, matches, parking, concessions, merchandise, etc. All of that is predicated on I'm going to be able to get to the black or stay in the black as long as I can host matches. If I can't host matches, or if I can't get butts and seats, if I have to play with empty stadiums because of the coronavirus, then most of these clubs have, unless their owners are willing to just bankroll them, most of these clubs have no chance of surviving in playing professional soccer because all of their budgets are predicated on match day revenue. And so that's one key point that you brought up that I just don't think a lot of people understand in comparison to a Bundesliga club or a Serie A club or a La Liga, Premier League, etc. The TV money is so big and the commercial revenue is so large in these European markets, they can afford to play behind closed doors. Are they still going to take a financial hit? Absolutely. But they've got revenue coming in that is far beyond anything that Major League Soccer could ever dream about at this point. And the USL and NISA have nothing in that department. And so, the realities of playing matches, home matches with spectators, with fans in the stadiums is paramount for these leagues' survival. And it's paramount, I think, for Major League Soccer too. I don't think they can run, with closed door, MLS matches for too long without it starting to make a significant financial impact on them as well. But they are a little less dependent on that. But USL and NISA are in trouble if they can't produce their match day revenues. And so looking at the realities of the schedule, which is where I want to get to, and you've referenced it as well. If we're looking at July, August, and, I just want to go through why this is a good idea for fall to spring and the realities, because there's some people up north who think there's no way this thing can happen, fall to spring, that you guys are in the South, that you don't understand. I'm going to tell you right now, players will tell you they would much rather play in 30-degree weather than in 100-degree weather. The health risks, the health and safety risks are severely much higher, much more severe for player health and safety at that 90, 100-degree weather compared to 30-degree weather. You can always throw in layers and get yourself warmed up. It is very hard to keep yourself cooled down in really hot and especially humid temperatures. So that's one aspect of this, and I'm glad you brought that up, because I don't think when we talk about this on a macro, and we're going to get into some of the specifics here in just a second about the practicalities of a fall to spring calendar, but that point that you brought up about fall to spring and player health and safety in the hot weather is so huge. And I get some fans are up north are like, well, I don't want to sit out in the cold for 30-degree weather. Well, you know what? You're not going to get near as many people coming in the summer in the South at 100-degree weather. We already see it right now. These people are not going to go and bake in 110-degree weather in Dallas, Texas in the middle of the summer. It's not happening.
Yeah, this is something that really I can't understand why the apologists, and most of them are your usual suspects that are very attached to Major League Soccer emotionally or for financial reasons. In a lot of cases, it's just people who seem to be attached emotionally and very myopic and just defend anything the league does. Cannot get their head around that more people. This is not a soccer statistic. This is a life statistic. More people in this country die every year of extreme heat and heat exhaustion and heat stroke and things like that than die in all the winter storms in this country. Okay? It's much more dangerous, as you said. If we're talking specifically about player safety, it's dangerous because of the heat, and it's exceedingly dangerous everywhere from Washington, D.C., Baltimore area south, and all the way west to New Mexico because of thunderstorms in the summer. They're in an indoor stadium, right? Atlanta, try having a team play outdoors in Atlanta during the summer. Well, we did have one, the Silverbacks, and we had tons of postponements, tons of delays. And we had so many weather delays. In fact, there was one season I tracked when I was working for NASL, Fort Lauderdale, their first 14 games, seven or eight of them had been affected by weather. Tampa Bay, like of their first 14 games, like 5 had been affected by weather. By affected, I mean postponed, right? They didn't kick off when they were supposed to kick off, or they did kick off, and then there was they had to suspend. Okay, this isn't the game that kicked off at 7:30 and ended at 9:30. Carolina Railhawks in the Raleigh-Durham area, same thing. I mentioned Charleston earlier. So this is a real issue. And I get people don't like sitting and being spectators in the cold. But I think players who naturally their body heats up, and we see the sort of extreme winter weather, maybe not extreme winter weather. It gets colder in this country than it does in England. But the kind of weather they play through in the Premier League, the kind of weather the Bundesliga has a long winter break, the kind of weather that they're able to schedule around in Germany, right? The kind of weather they're able to schedule around in Italy, where they also have a winter break, a shorter one, but they have a winter break in Serie A because the northern part of the country where Milan and Juventus and some of the more decorated clubs are, Inter, gets quite cold. They're at elevation, and they get quite cold in the winter. So this isn't a difficult thing. This is the thing. I think there's been a lot of deception and a lot of dishonesty among those who support Major League Soccer's position on this, and then the other U.S. leagues have all fallen in line. In the case of NISA, they have stated that they want to be on the European calendar. Now, of course, they've had a little bit of clunky rollout and teams coming and going, but I think ultimately that's their goal. They get it at that league. USL might be forced into this. I think you hit it on the nail on the head. USL and NISA have no choice. They've got to get full seasons in. Or they have to abort the season completely so that that money is not spent. But I think right now, in the case of USL, because they started their season, well, NISA did too. I think they have to finish it because players are under contract, the staff, unless they furlough the whole staff. I think in the case of a lot of these clubs, they're really just on the edge. And you're right about MLS. MLS does not have the sort of revenues that the Bundesliga or La Liga or the Premier League have. So you're in a situation where, no, the league won't collapse, or teams may not collapse if they don't get all their matches in this season, but they'll be behind the eight ball, so to speak, in the future. So they are more dependent on match day revenues than the first divisions in Europe. So they're going to need to try and get, obviously in MLS, each team has 17 home games. I think they're going to need to try and get as many of those in as possible, maybe 15 per team. And then in USL, they're going to need to get about 15 per team in also. So that's 30 games per team at a minimum. You're going to have to realign the calendar to do that because we're not going to be playing soccer in May. I'm almost sure we're not going to be playing soccer in June. July, maybe. Maybe that's realistic. August. Hey, look, here's the other thing. There's all these excuses related to American football, and they always make that excuse, and that is just an excuse, as you said at the outset, because you're going to come up against them one way or another. And actually, if you realign your calendar, your playoffs are going up against the NHL playoffs, the start of baseball, some major golf tournaments, right? The PGA Championships now in May, the NBA playoffs, but you're not going up against football. Now, they've got the business under their season. I mean, I'll never forget the night that the MLS Cup, David Beckham's final match in Major League Soccer was played at the very same time as the SEC championship game. Now, in the part of the country you and I live in, Daniel, there's only one thing that people are watching that night, right? And it wasn't the MLS Cup. So this idea that if we realign the calendar, football is going to affect us, it already does affect us. But I think realistically, you're going up against lesser opposition. And let's face it, we can't plan based on other sports because we don't know what's going to happen with the other sports and their calendars now.
Right.
I mean, I do not think, I don't know, I don't really follow the NFL, so I don't know what's going on there, but I do follow college football, and I do have some contacts in athletic departments here in the Southeast, and they all tell me, don't expect college football to kick off the last week of August to the first week of September. That it's just not realistically going to happen. And that kind of shocked me, honestly, because I'm thinking from our soccer perspective, okay, by the time we get to August, September, we'll be fine. We just have to figure out how we recalibrate our season. They're thinking, because they didn't have spring football, which would be going on right now, right? Or just finishing, it usually finishes around Easter.
Right.
That's out the window. So that means they need that much more practice time for their players. and they're not going to start practicing on time, that basically the college football season will be delayed in some fashion. So once I was hearing that, I was thinking, my goodness, if people who are MLS apologists are now still planning and saying we can't do such and such because of football, they really don't have an excuse anymore, because football may not even be on the same calendar, at least for a year, maybe two, who knows? I mean, once you play at a different time of the year, because I think the thing that we've always seen when there have been work stoppages in these sports, in the NHL and baseball, in basketball, the NBA had a strike a few years ago, that they always finish the season at the same time, right? Or in the case of one baseball season 25 years ago, more than 25 years ago, they didn't finish the season at all. But in the other seasons, they finish on time. You missed the beginning of the season. This is the first time I think we're going to see seasons of American sports that don't finish on time. There's no way the NBA season's finishing on time. I mean, it's physically impossible at this point. So there's no way the NHL season's finishing on time. We know the PGA Tour is already, the Open Championship, which was going to be at Royal St. George's this year, has been canceled. We know that the Masters is planning on playing in November. So a U.S. Open is apparently going to play in September or October. Things are going to change. So if you're then saying, well, we can't calibrate our calendar because of football or golf or whatever the competing interest is, then you just know they're full of it when they say that.
Absolutely. And when you look at the realities of being a sport like soccer, a global sport, but in a market like the American market, where the NFL is, in American football, is the number one financial TV ratings bonanza sport on American television, the NFL, American football with college football, and everything else, every other sport trails American football. The idea that you're going to, and MLS apologists saying this, I just laugh when they say, well, you can't go up against, the NFL and college football. I'm like, what are you talking about? All of your playoffs and your signature final right now is going head to head with the NFL and college football. Yeah. And when you get into the weather side of the conversation and you look at the calendars of American football that generally start August, September and run into January, and the Super Bowl usually right now finishing up that first Sunday in February, and then look at American soccer, professional soccer, and the typical calendar that you look at for Major League Soccer, for example. Right now, they're getting together in January and February for their preseason camps. So they're back in their activities in January, February. They're kicking off into February, beginning of March, their season right now. They're running their season right through, as we've already talked about, the worst possible weather situation for fans and for player safety, and that is these really, really hot, humid situations of 90 to 100 degrees plus in June and July, and in August. They're running through that, and then they go right into the heart of American football in the fall to start their playoffs in September, October, and then finish their playoffs in November. It used to run into December. So this idea that Major League Soccer could not start their season sometime in August and take a winter break just like the Bundesliga and then finish up in May like the rest of the world, or if, let's say, their signature final is the first weekend of June or whatever, right? To accommodate the winter break, if there was some accommodation like that. This idea that it's undoable is just crazy. I mean, you could easily take into account some of the winter weather situations. If there are teams in the north that, February is a bad month for them to play, you can schedule them for the dome games or for Southern games. You know, go play in Miami, go play in Atlanta, go play in Nashville, go play in Dallas. Could it be cold in some of those cities? Yes, but are you as likely to get a 14-foot blizzard in an outdoor stadium in New England or in Dallas? You're probably going to get hit in New England. So have the Revolution go play in Dallas in February. I mean, this idea that you can't do some intelligent scheduling and work around some of those logistics, those are just weak excuses. And then the idea of American football in stadiums and sharing stadiums, that's already happening. The New England Revolution in the fall and into their playoffs, NYCFC playing in Yankee Stadium and the baseball playoffs are going on. They're already dealing with having to shuffle around matches and games, whatever, based on baseball or based on American football, because they've chosen to play in non-soccer specific stadiums for those two teams anyway. So this idea that starting your season in August, September and dealing with that through the fall is somehow would be new. That again is laughable. I think there is not a single valid reason other than those who are in charge don't want the sport to operate fall to spring, because there's not a valid reason from an economic standpoint, the transfer window standpoint, a player health and safety standpoint. People think that playing through the summer is a great idea. I'm going to tell you right now, a lot of people in the summers, generally, maybe not this year, but generally, that's vacation. They're not planning their whole season, their summer around coming to your matches. They're going to the beach. They're going on a vacation. They're going to Disney World. It's much more likely that you're going to get them to come to a Friday night or a Saturday or Sunday game in the fall, winter, and spring than you're going to get them to do that in the summertime. I cannot find a single valid reason. Maybe you've got one that you've heard that makes sense, but I can't think of one for staying on a spring to fall, especially knowing what we know about the gate revenue, the commercial revenue, the lack of TV money, the realities of coronavirus, why we wouldn't just be going, hey, let's be proactive, go big, and realign the schedule and use this as an opportunity for revolution. I don't understand it.
No, I don't get it either, Daniel. I think that we're at a point now that because of the need to get this season in, we might slowly hear those arguments fade away. Or you might just have the MLS fanboy, for lack of a better term, double and triple and quadruple down on them and say, we can't play, it's too cold. I don't know why they can't even adopt the calendar. They're in such close financial and really kind of almost cartel-like alliance with the Mexican Federation and the Mexican League, Liga MX, through Soccer United Marketing. I don't know why they can't just mimic the calendar from Mexico, which it involves a winter break. They're done. Now, this year, because of Monterrey playing in the Club World Cup and the way it worked out, their final wasn't until the 26th of December. But generally, it's like December 8th. They break. It's around the same time as MLS Cup used to be. They break. They come back in late January. I think you might need a longer break, obviously, from MLS. I would say from maybe the last week of November through early February. But then you effectively put Miami at home. I said Tampa, my goodness. Orlando at home, Atlanta at home, Nashville at home, Dallas, Houston, the LA teams, and then you bring everybody to San Jose, Seattle can play at home, and Seattle has an odd climate, right? It doesn't really, it's kind of like England. It doesn't get too cold there. It never gets that warm either. Seattle, Portland can probably play at home also, honestly. Both those teams also have turf, so that may make it easier. And then Minnesota can be away from home. New England can be away from home. The New York teams can be away from home. Philly, DC United. It gets kind of cold in Washington, but realistically, you could play there in the winter. And actually, Washington is a pretty dangerous place to play in the summer. You want to talk about a place that's boiling hot where the level of play is pretty low during the summer. Maybe Audi Field's a little different. It's on the Anacostia. There's maybe some more natural wind and stuff. But RFK, that place was baking and dangerous during the summer to play. But bona fide dangerous place. And if you haven't spent any time in Washington, D.C. in July or August, I suggest you don't. It is absolutely, and I'm someone who's from Florida, it is absolutely the hottest place I've been outside of India, where my parents are from, where I've gone back a lot during the summer. Washington, D.C., I lived there once upon a time. Washington, D.C. is so hot in the summer. So we're playing in dangerous conditions as it is my point. D.C. United plays in dangerous conditions. There's all kinds of lightning storms in Dallas and Houston during the summer. So I don't understand why we continue to have this argument. And I think the other thing for me on this is that this will give American soccer the opportunity to kind of marry itself with the European transfer windows and kind of see where that goes. And a lot of us have theories about it, that it'll be really good and beneficial. It'll create a player market for American players that doesn't exist now. We could be wrong about that, right? I mean, I concede I could be wrong about that, but we don't really know. And my theory is, and I know you share this, and folks like Eric Winalda do also, that it will only improve our guys to have our transfer windows aligned and have our guys start their season and end their season at the same time as the big clubs in Europe, making transfers more attractive. And also, there have been just a number of guys that have been MLS players that have either not ended up getting the transfer they wanted in a winter window. Aaron Long most recently, but I think even a likes of George John, going back a little bit, Taylor Twellman, and Charlie Joseph, because our windows didn't align, and it was the middle of the season in Europe. The teams that had been interested in them over the summer weren't interested or as interested, weren't going to pay as much in January. Eddie Johnson, actually, the first couple times before he went to Fulham, when Sporting Lisbon and Benfica were interested in him, he wasn't able to go, and they weren't able to make the deal because it was the middle of the season for Kansas City. And then also the guys who have gone, like Brek Shea, like a number of others I'm blanking out on now, that have gone in the winter window and then have bombed out. Actually, when Eddie Johnson did go to Fulham, that's what happened. When he finally went, it was in the winter window because the MLS had previously rejected any deals for him in summer windows. And finally he said, I'm not going to re-sign with the league. And so they sold him right before his contract expired. Couple of years past the sell-by date, and it didn't work out. But there have been a number of situations like that where our guys have gone over in the middle of the season to a big club. In the case of Brek Shea, it was to Stoke in the Premier League, who was I know they've been relegated now, but they were the time when he got there. I think they finished the year he got there. They finished 9th in the league, so they were pretty good. And there was no way he was going to break into that team. And we've seen his career go downhill since. So there are a number of examples like that where we've actually lost players, I think, that were decent and they didn't get to move when they could move. And when they finally moved, it was the wrong timing because our calendars were misaligned. So there's a lot of historical examples of guys that I think got screwed, and ultimately that screwed the national team, was losing those guys. I mean, it was there was actually that era when Jurgen Klinsmann was playing Brek Shea at left back, and when he went to Stoke, and he just bombed out. He came back to Orlando when they moved to MLS, and he wasn't the same player. I remember watching him the first few games. Like, this guy has none of the confidence, none of the swagger he had with the national team or with FC Dallas in his first stint in MLS. I mean, he's broken, and it was because he went in a window, because MLS won't sell their guys in summer, right? So he went in the January window, and that team was already set at that point, and he couldn't break in. So it happened to Juan Agudelo too. That's another player. He also went in that window, and he kind of bombed out back in MLS now. So I just think the transfer window thing, I could be wrong about it, but I'm almost positive that there'll be some improvement.
Well,
if we run our windows.
I agree with your assessment on the exportation of players, but I also look at it from an importation of players. I think if we ever get to a place, and I know that there are clubs in this country. There are owners in this country. There are franchises in this country in Major League Soccer standpoints who have designs, ambitions to import players, and and they really want to invest in their teams. Aligning the windows also gives us a better chance to do the importation of players, just like we're talking about with the exportation of American players, getting them over to Europe. There's also opportunities, I think, to better align these windows to bring in talent into the country and raise the quality level there as well. And again, back to my point before we move on, when you look at Major League Soccer historically in their operations, they have operated in all 12 months. In some form or fashion, whether it's been preseason in the January, February area, or kicking off their league in late February, early March, finishing up their seasons in November, December. So the idea that they couldn't kick off a season in August, September, and then finish up their season in sometime in late May, again, looking at the historical aspects of where MLS has operated, and also knowing what could be done from a scheduling standpoint, from logistics, weather, etc. There's just no really good reason to keep it where it is. I don't know why. If you're a television executive and you're looking at your next big deal, if I'm Major League Soccer, I'm looking at my next big deal, and I'm going to a TV executive and I'm going, look, our signature final, we want it to be in late May versus we wanted to go up against college football and the NFL in November or December. The TV execs are going to pick option A every time. They're going to say, give us the schedule where you guys play your signature finals in May, not at going up against the NFL and college football. We don't want any part of that. And so I think you could see much more TV revenue come in just by the realignment of the schedule, from Major League Soccer standpoint. And maybe that eventually could also help the USL as well to do that also. And another aspect of American soccer that is we're having to deal with at the moment is the reality of the U.S. Open Cup, and there's a real possibility that this continuously running tournament is going to be canceled. And, looking at it, I would hate to see that happen. The leagues are dealing with these realities, which, like we just talked about, I think could be dealt with by getting their calendar properly aligned fall to spring. But one of the other things I think that could be really fun would be a one-time only special format to get the U.S. Open Cup in and keep the tournament continuously running without taking a break. Get it in by bringing in these champions from NISA, USL League 2, League 1, USL Championship, MLS, the past U.S. Open Cup champion, maybe the Supporter Shield winner, etc. I think you could seed this in kind of a smaller format tournament with a few amateur teams and some professional teams, and get some version of a special version of a U.S. Open Cup completed for 2020 at some point. And I would love to see something like that happen. I wonder what your thoughts are on the U.S. Open Cup in general, and this idea of keeping it running, and the idea of maybe a special format this year.
Yeah, I think in reality, we probably are not going to get the tournament in this year. So we could do one of two things. Your suggestion is quite good, and that might be something that allows those clubs to get some extra revenue. The other thing we could do is have an amateur tournament or tournament for adult amateur teams, because I think my concern for the Open Cup this year is that it's going to be really cost prohibitive for USL and NISA teams in particular. Midweek games without much lead-in, in rented facilities, they already are kind of a loss leader. There's a certain romanticism around the cup, but there's a practical financial reality also. And that goes back to U.S. soccer not incentivizing the cup by putting really no prize money into it and minimal promotion. Although the promotion's gotten better the last few years, I'll concede that. But I think we could either have a tournament with amateur teams entirely and award a U.S. Open Cup winner that way, or we could follow your suggestion, and then it's just the kind of the cream of the crop among professional teams, and then you do get a couple of NPSL and UPSL and PDL teams in there, maybe a couple of teams from other independent teams from smaller regional leagues, and maybe you play it off over like 2 weeks and just get it done with. I'd like to see the tournament keep that record going of being played every year since 1913 or 1914, if it's possible. And I think those are the two options: the option you outlined and this other option, which is just to make it a tournament for amateur teams. Amateur teams, many of whose season would have been scrubbed completely anyway. So this gives them something, and it won't be as cost prohibitive as a like if I'm an ESA team. Like if I'm Chattanooga, and we know Chattanooga's already withdrawn from the Open Cup 1 year because of cost. If I'm Chattanooga or Detroit, and I'm not really going to get the opportunity to play NFC Cincinnati or an Atlanta United, I think it's really cost prohibitive. It's cost prohibitive for Chattanooga to play a game in Open Cup this year. They got to get some NISA games in, get some revenue in from those games. So that's where I am on it. I mean, I'd like to see it continue. I think it's going to be difficult, but maybe we can play off just a small tournament somehow. And I said, if we have a tournament among amateur teams, let's just limit it to the amateur teams that qualified for the first round proper, right? And maybe play off among them. Let's not open it back up, just so we can get the tournament in the books.
Yeah, I want to see the tournament in the books somehow, some way, and I do want to say that this idea about this kind of U.S. Open Cup special one-time tournament of champions format that would include UPSL and USL League 2 and the NPSL, etc. It's not my idea. It's one I saw from the OpenCup.us at the OpenCup.us on Twitter. So I wanted to give them credit. That was not my idea, but I love it. I love the idea. I think it's a creative solution. We need more of those types of creative solutions in dealing with the realities of where we are in American soccer despite COVID-19. Now with COVID-19, we especially need creative solutions to overcome some of the challenges. And some of these, quite frankly, challenges have occurred because they're self-inflicted wounds. If we were not operating on a spring to fall, we would have already had a big chunk of seasons, just like Europe, already in the books. We would be waiting to finish out, the last 8 weeks or so of a season, 10 weeks of a season, not wondering if we could ever get a season off the ground. And I understand that just happens to be the timing of how this coronavirus pandemic, spread in the timeline, et cetera. But if we were in line with the rest of the world, I do think that we would have been better off, even if it had hit at some other time, because we would be dealing with the same realities. Now we're trying to figure out, how do we start? How do we finish? And these other leagues are having to figure out the same thing. And now this idea of transfer windows could be completely thrown off beyond what they are right now, which is not really the best format, as you've mentioned, where these European leagues are not necessarily wanting to go big and heavy into the transfer market in January compared to June and July into August. And so, you've got 3 months of a MLS season taking place in June, July, and August, while these teams are wanting to do their business, and MLS not wanting to release their players, and then the other way around, trying to get players in, and then it's just a mess. And so I really want to see that happen with the Open Cup, and I really want to see the fall to spring with our professional leagues. I want to close with you with a little bit of rapid fire, COVID-19 rapid fire, some topics specifically related to COVID-19, and get your thoughts on it. First thought is there's been an idea floated around a little bit on social media this idea of U.S. Soccer, either through their own funds or working on behalf of their clubs with the U.S. government to try to create some type of relief package, stimulus package, bailout, whatever word you want to use, for professional as well as some amateur clubs within the U.S. soccer ecosystem. Wanted to get your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I'm all for it. I'm a big advocate of it. I think that this is the best way the surplus can be used by U.S. Soccer to promote and protect clubs that might otherwise go out of business or have a very hard time making it through 2020. What we're seeing in Germany is an effort from the top clubs in the Bundesliga to support the clubs that they think may not make it. And in fact, there's someone who told me on background after COVID-19 started that he's fearful that there could be 15, 20 club failures in Germany because of this. Similarly, in England, there is a lot of pressure on the Premier League and the FA to send more money down the pyramid and support the lower division clubs. They have already sent some money down. There's growing pressure from the media and from supporters to do more. In this country, we have seen no pressure yet on U.S. Soccer on this issue, which is stunning. No pressure on Major League Soccer to maybe do something to help out USL, help out NPSL and NISA, and also, quite frankly, NWSL, because I think there's growing concern that NWSL might be in a position because of their TV deal with CBS and taking money from CBS, that if they can't get a season in, they're going to have to return that money. And of course, CBS had given NWSL a couple of dates, right, on the over-the-air channel, which now will disappear if NFL and golf are delayed. I mean, we're already trying to figure out how they're going to get the Masters in with the NFL and the PGA Championship in with the NFL, because those are two CBS major tournaments, golf tournaments that have now been postponed and will be pushed into presumably NFL season. Now, again, we don't know when the NFL is going to kick off. But so there were a lot of concerns around the financial health of the game in this country outside of Major League Soccer. U.S. Soccer needs to step up and help those clubs.
I think Major League Soccer, I think the U.S. Soccer directly, as well as lobbying on behalf of their clubs and leagues, definitely should be leading the charge. We should be a federation for all, and we need to come together during this crisis. So I agree. There's a lot more that could be done, and I think should be done in that regard. Next rapid fire topic with COVID-19. Should U.S. Soccer, the federation, be working through some scenarios? At the very least, I think it should be permanent, but at the very least, for the near term, some regulations from the federation in terms of minimizing the economic impact on families. And what I mean by that is, the amount of travel that is expected of these travel teams, or maybe it's tournaments, etc. Just, I'm looking at the realities of unemployment and other aspects, and obviously the travel bans that are in place right now. And in the near future, should U.S. Soccer be trying to work on some set of guidelines, restrictions, regulations, whatever words you want to use, similar to what Little League Baseball did in limiting the pitch count for their pitchers to protect their arms and shoulders? Should the federation be working to minimize some of the impacts of travel and the economic impacts of travel on their youth players, at least in the interim?
Yes, absolutely. And this is another place where U.S. Soccer can spend some of its surplus, can also I think mitigate some of the difficulties for youth clubs that they're going to face. I think the distances they have to travel, they're just not practical now when we're talking about an environment where even once we reopen, we're going to have a certain degree of social distancing. I think life is going to be very much more localized. That's going to be an impact of this, at least for 6 to 9 to 12 months. The scale of life will be more local for most people. And this is also actually a concern for MLS. I would also say, just real quickly on this issue, there has been an increasing amount of pressure for U.S. soccer to leave the youth soccer space with the Development Academy and just allow, just be a facilitator for U.S. Club Soccer, ECNL, U.S. Youth Soccer, whoever it is, right? Maybe this will hasten the process. So I think anything that also gets U.S. soccer out of the youth soccer business and gets them back to being the governing body and kind of facilitator for all of the different facets and angles of youth soccer is helpful.
All right. Last topic for our COVID-19 rapid fire segment here as we wrap up today is the effects of COVID-19 on the soccer economy in terms of TV and commercial dollars in the near term. What are your thoughts on the economic impact on these TV and commercial rights deals? Obviously, when we're talking about TV, we're specifically looking at professional clubs. But when you look at commercial revenue, that means sponsors, that means youth clubs, that means adult amateur clubs and professional clubs. When we're talking about commercial revenue, what are you seeing or projecting in a short term basis economic impacts of COVID-19 on TV money and commercial revenue for American soccer?
Yeah, so we haven't had any problems yet like they've had in France, where the domestic broadcasters have asked for a refund from Liga. That's what Germany apparently is trying to avoid by maybe forcing a quicker restart. Although it should be noted, Germany as a nation, I don't want to get into politics here, but their government under Angela Merkel, they took much stronger steps than the U.S., Italy, Spain, the U.K., some of these other countries. So maybe they will reopen as a country earlier than the other countries we're talking about. But there was an issue with domestic broadcasters there. There's potentially one in England as well. So that's why they're trying to force a restart. We haven't heard it here yet. However, I'm concerned about the CBS thing with NWSL, as I mentioned just a few moments ago. And I think if MLS does not deliver some sort of number to ESPN and Fox, that might be an issue. And I don't know if they try and make it up through increased U.S. national team games, because that's part of that sum deal, or this actually, it's a great question to end our show on this morning, because I think this, Daniel, could be the issue that forces them to realign the calendar and get the whole season in, because they don't want to return that television money. And we know yesterday ESPN laid off a bunch of people or furloughed a bunch of people and made them others take pay cuts, right? So we know they're not doing particularly well, and they can only run so many reruns of games and documentaries. I know they got the Chicago Bulls documentary coming out later this month, but they can only do that for so long. So if MLS doesn't deliver to them the number of games they were supposed to have, remember they were supposed to have a number of games on ABC this year, which has not been the case in the most recent seasons. They might want some money back or want some sort of offset. So keep an eye on that. That's a great way to end the show, because I think that might be the thing that forces the calendar realignment more than anything is TV money.
I hope so. I hope we get to that fall to spring calendar alignment. I don't want to see businesses fail around the country due to this. I know a lot of people are struggling and trying to figure out how to get through. But I hope that we find, creative solutions. Anytime you have a crisis or you have a situation that is disadvantageous like this, it's important to take a deep breath and just start working through opportunities and solutions rather than getting caught up in the negatives, because those can get overwhelming. And in this case, as we've talked through today, I just think it's so obvious that this is the year to pull the trigger on the fall to spring calendar. If ever there was a year to do it, this is the year to do it. And I hope that some in the room at U.S. Soccer, as well as Major League Soccer and the USL, have a real serious rethink about where they are and figure this thing out because, as we detailed today, I just don't think there's a lot of excuses left. So, Kartik, thanks for hopping on today and joining us. I appreciate your thoughts and your time, and keep up the great work. How can people connect with you on social media?
Yeah, KKFLA737 on Twitter is the easiest place and best place to find me.
Well, Kartik, thanks for joining the show. We appreciate it as always. Look forward to having you back on again soon.
Yeah, thank you, Daniel. Stay safe. Stay safe to everyone out there.
Absolutely. I agree with Kartik. Thanks to him for coming on the show today. We'll be right back after this.
No one, no man, no woman, no child should ever have to drink green water with bugs, with algae, with disease in it. Bad water and a lack of toilets kills more people than all the wars in the world. We know how to bring clean drinking water right now to every single person on earth. And when you can bring water into communities, it truly transforms them. It changes everything. Or you could know that you'd made a difference. You could know that you had truly impacted the life of a family, of a community, of a region. There was either clean water or there wasn't. We believe in a world where every single person has clean and safe water to drink, and we will continue fighting until that happens.
Thanks for tuning in today. Appreciate it as always. Big thank you to Kartik Krishner for joining the show and spending most of the hour with us today. Talking through the fall to spring calendar, the Open Cup, and some COVID-19 rapid fire at the end. You can watch the show, as always, weekdays live at 9 a.m. Eastern. If you want to find places to watch, just go to danielworkman.com/watch. danielworkman.com/watch, and you can find some of the different ways that you can watch the show live each and every weekday morning. We'll see you again tomorrow.